Hello everybody, it's The Worm, and I'm back with Raging Loop. Last time, it was the story of the murderer. That's right, it was the story of the old man who cried wolf, and we learned pretty much his whole deal about what led him to the state he's currently in, and his arrangement with the Migurumas, and all of it was pretty crazy. And as I feel pretty similar to how Haruaki feels, or felt at the end of that whole confrontation, in that we have to be on our toes around him. It is a bit freaky now that this whole time he's just been this kind of weird presence, and he's just always kind of just been there, and he never really felt like... Well, he did kill Mochi that one time, but he's never really felt menacing, you know? And he was even kind of funny at times. But now, to know that, oh yeah, he's completely aware and utterly malevolent. And he's just sitting there watching us throughout this whole thing. So that's definitely, well, it's quite something. But we did learn some important info. We learned that we needed to have a fortress in order to survive this. I'm not sure exactly what that is going to be, or if it's more a metaphor for something, or, you know, I guess we'll find out. And that apparently the god is something created by humans, and we'll there was a comment referring to that, and we'll get to that. Also, we learned that perhaps the reasoning behind why the Migurumas are getting involved with the modern feasts has to do with evidence from their past. Specifically, apparently they were involved with human trafficking, and there was evidence to prove it from an envelope that the old man took. I'm not sure if that is still the reason they are actively participating in the feast, but that seems to be why they started to mess with the modern feast. That's pretty much most of the main stuff. Next, we're going to presumably begin the final part of this game, which is pretty crazy. It's a pretty crazy thing to say. There are a couple comments I want to address before moving on. One thing is that a bunch of people were saying how, you know, I was a bit confused about what Haruaki was meaning when he was talking about the old wolf guy, and at the same time we were showed the image of the werewolf. And I was thinking, well, does he mean that it's the old wolf guy that's the werewolf? And a bunch of people reminded me, actually, what usually happens is there are multiple werewolves. So even if he was one of these werewolves, then there would have to be more of them. So it's either it's him and others, or it's not him. So that's good to get reminded of. There was also a couple other things. I do like the idea from the Cool that it may actually be the old man who brings the wolf uniforms. Although I guess maybe you could try to say that's his old uniform from back when he was a wolf. So I could see it as being either or there. And then there's one final thing I want to point out. Okay, so this is coming from Lise, this idea. And specifically, this was talking about... Okay, we were talking about the supernatural stuff, in particular the stuff with the werewolves. And during that conversation, it was mentioned about how um, Chemi has at times, remember, at the very end of the very first route, when we were trying to flee, at one point she sort of breaks down. That's the nice way of putting it. But she falls apart, falls into pieces, her body. And while talking about this, Lise basically presented the idea that the people's beliefs here may translate to real consequences. That's probably not the best way to put it, but essentially it's Chemi's belief that she couldn't escape led to the result that we saw, which was she fell apart. Her belief that she maybe was becoming a Yomibito or is a Yomibito and is trapped here due to that. And it's such a great idea that, I'm whether or not it ends up being fully the case, I really wish I would have made this jump here. So the idea that our thoughts and beliefs can actually translate into what's going on here has to do with the idea that we're in a dream, right? And all of this sort of crazy supernatural stuff that we're seeing, I don't know why I didn't make this sort of leap earlier, but maybe a lot of this is coming from the beliefs of the villagers themselves. And so the only supernatural thing that might be going on here, I know I've said before maybe it was just the looping, but maybe it's the dream itself that it's the only supernatural sort of thing that's going on here. And it's just people's expectations and their ideas about what's going on in the dream actually causes those things to happen, or something like that. Again, I've not thought about it enough to make some concrete statements. The only thing, of course, is so here's a question then. At the end of Darkness, were we still in the dream when the monster woke up? I want to say yes. Because, well, here's the thing. Is this one of those instances where how much time is passing in real life versus the dream here? That's my question. Is it one of those things where, okay, lots of time is passing in the dream, but on the outside it's only been something like a day, something weird like that? I mean, and here's the other thing. Presumably this is like a weird sort of collective dream where all of us are in together, because presumably Haruaki is not the dreamer, right? And yet he is his own independent entity that, with the backing of the sheep, has been able to influence the dream. So the thought is everyone is still alive, right? It's just we're all in a collective dream. Because the sheep's power is to have us go back in the dream repeatedly. Man, I'm confused. I need... I hope we finally get a bit... we're definitely getting the answers, so I shouldn't word it like that, but I hope we start getting some concrete answers on this whole dream business, because now I'm kind of confusing myself here. Either way, let's get back into it. I'm gonna have a final look at all the keys we have for this. Let's give me a moment and we'll get back into it. Okay, we're back into it. Let's take a look at the keys that we needed to unlock this ending, or this branch here. Okay, so the keys we needed to use were 1, 3, 8, 9, and 19. Let's see if anything can jump out at us if we compare these real quick. Hunter's Confession. By revealing my true self to Kanzo-san, I managed to have a heart-to-heart with him. As a survivor of the previous 2 feasts, the most important thing he told me was, though the feast wasn't over, the mist cleared. That implies 2 things. First, the clearing of the mist can't be perfectly controlled, and second, there was definitely a wolf who survived the feast. We now know that that's the old man. Also, I may have grasped some hints to the reason Haru-chan entered Yasumi's 8 years ago and returned alive. I don't specifically recall that at the moment. Okay, let's look at 9. Myth and Archetype. Hisako taught me some useful knowledge about mythology and psychology. The story about the spider divinities were particularly impressionable. The Amatsukami, the Kunitsukami, the Great Mother Archetype, dream catchers. Now then, what could be the spider Fujiyoshi? Then we got 8. As I thought Kinosuke was a reasonable man, with his help I was able to learn the head's perception of the Feast of the Omi Purge as well as the long historical background behind it. Through death, I learned the Miguruma are using a cutting-edge surveillance network and are intervening with Yasumizu. This will be huge because we're resolving the incident. Then we have 3. Just like me, Chimi also loops back in time whenever she dies, retaining her memories. Her heart has been wounded and twisted through the maddening cycles of death and rebirth, but she hasn't been completely broken yet. She made me realize that the trigger for the loops isn't either of our deaths. In hindsight, there should have been times I looped where my cause of death goes vague. If I can get the vague, loops the mastermind. And remember, the only time we were able to see that was during Wit, when we caught and Mochi and pointed him out during a feast and got him hanged. And after that, the loop ended. So, that's that. Drew Evil, the man who cried wolf, turned out to be the killer behind the Fujiyoshi murder 60 years ago. He colluded with the Miguruma to assist with the progression of the Feast of the Omi Purge. Behavior aside, I learned some things from the pure evil that dwells within him. First of all, I'll need a fortress in order to survive, and most importantly, the concept that God can be killed. Now, if we're thinking about, dream logic here, maybe it's the belief in God can be killed. Maybe it's something like that. At least that's one interpretation I can see here. I mean, we're talking about myths and archetypes and all that sort of stuff. One more thing I think I want to talk about. Where was it? Yeah, the thing with Chami is, for one, it's her looping, and the fact that, her looping is so different from ours. Well, not so different, but somewhat different from ours. And the idea that she's a Miguruma, too. It's like these two things that makes me, it's I don't know. I don't think she's the dreamer. But I want to say there's something even more with Chami that I don't know yet. Okay. Let's actually move on, I think. There may come a time where I'm forced to try and give an answer to these. And I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So we are currently at the very end of Darkness. And this is the reason why I was worried at the end of last episode, is because this is the place that the sheep said, never, ever, ever come here again. So we're here again, and I don't know how we're going to get out of this. So let's hope Haruaki has a plan. Of course, it could have just been. This is one of those, probably another one of those instances where he didn't really have a choice. It's just this is when his memories came back to him again. So he's going to have to improvise something very quickly. I shook my head, chasing away the thing, the delusion clinging to my head.
どうしたの?
Oops, sorry, Meiko. Or sorry, Haruaki. Her voice was shaking. Did she see a spider or something? Interesting. I followed her outside. Call for that person. Here we go. This is what we've been waiting for. All those keys. All these moments. All right. I remembered it now. I went outside, ignored the monster, and shouted.
羊さん! 羊さん!
Suddenly the world turned gray and that person appeared before me.
バカかてめえはバカかてめえはバカかてめえは
出たな羊さん。いきなりバカの三聖将とはひどいじゃないか。
空気を読め俺は黄金じゃねえあとてめえここに絶対戻ってくんなっつったよな
3回それぞれに意味があったのか。なるほどなるほど。
Yeah, see, so that's fair.
どうすんだどうすんだよもうフォローできねえぞおい
Like, so this was what I was asking before. Are we still in the dream? Do you remember the sheep said, you know, this being, this spider, whatever this is, destroyed the country or something? What does that mean? Does it mean in the dream or in real life? Are we in real life right now? I don't... But if we were, how would the sheep have power over that? I don't know. I'm getting confused.
フォローは不要です。
は？
全部謎は解けました。
Okay, Haruaki, you've said this before, but I'm willing to hear you out again. I said that with a serious tone.
いやそう言われてもああほら見ろバケモンなんかビーム的なやつを発射してんじゃねえか
Launching beams? I want to see that.
ありゃ町一つは吹き飛びましたね。
Oh my goodness.
なんなのお前のその感じ警告を破った以上ありゃてめえの責任だぞこんちくしょ
畜生に畜生と言われるなんて。
絶対殺すてめえだけは俺が手ずからぶっ殺す
事件の解決のためには時間が足りないんですよね。
はあ
Resolving this incident wouldn't be easy. There were 3 things that had to be done. I had to stop the people from Yasumizu from killing each other in the feast. I had to deal with the Master of the Loop who wanted the monster's resurrection. And I had to deal with the Meguruma, the leaders of the feast. Sounds fair enough. The first one would be the hardest. I had to prepare for it, for the big act.
羊さん、お願いです。巻き戻りが始まるよりできるだけ前に巻き戻してくれませんか？
Are we doing this? Are we going for the perfect run? All right. I'm up for that.
だからもう二度はねえって言っただろうが絶対気づかれるから戻すのは一度きりだってよ
気づかれてもいいです。
Are you saying you only need this one try?
は
気づかれた場合のリスクってあなたがもう夢を操れなくなるってことですよね。つまりあなたも僕も巻き戻りに飲み込まれて記憶も維持できずただ延々同じことを繰り返す。
そうだが
つまり今回また羊さんの力で巻き戻る。羊さんが気づかれて夢に巻き込まれる。
That's quite the gamble.
そこから死なずに全部解決すれば問題なくないですか？
問題は3つある。まず今のスターティングポイントから何日前まで戻せるかはわからねえ。下手すりゃ数時間が関の山かもしれねえ。次にその時にお前と俺の記憶を保持できるかは賭けになる。夢操作の瞬間に捕まらない保証はない。最後にマジで全部解決できるんだろうな。
Okay, game. Are you asking me or are you asking Haruaki? Haruaki thinks he can. I don't know if I can.
ざけんな。
ノーダメージクリアについて自信が揺らいだだけです。
Haruaki, I think we need to do this flawlessly.
やってみせますよ。最悪ちょっとばかりダメージを受けるかもしれませんが、それならまあ確実です。
What do you mean by damage? Uh-oh.
まあじゃ困んだよ。
じゃあ絶対を保証します。その代わりあなたの仕事にも絶対の保証をください。最低でも振り出しから丸1日は時間を稼いでください。あと記憶の保持は絶対確実にお願いします。一つでも取りこぼしたら僕の保証はなくなりますからね。
調子乗りやがって。どうにしたって巻き戻さねえとこの国が終わる。てめえ分かってて逃げ場をなくしただろ。
はい、実のところそのくらい腹をくくらないとこの黒幕は倒せないです。
失敗したらお前何がどうなっても殺すからな。
え
え。いいだろう。いでよ100万匹分の羊の糞。
ちょっと待ってくださいよ。
うるせえ。てめえの勝手放題を100万トンの汚物の中でちった反省しながら死ね。
Well, it's certainly an original way to go.
1頭あたり1トンの換算だとすると一体何ヶ月分の糞に相当するのか。
もう1億トンでいいわ。
ごめんなさいごめんなさい。
My apology went unheard. Saturday, huh? I woke up. This unpleasant awakening and the general discomfort in this room, it was that awful inn I'd visited.
お目覚めですか？
うわ、また中井が勝手に入ってきた。
At least it wasn't that needlessly energetic proprietress.
夕べはお楽しみでしたね。
もうだいぶ前のことだから思い出せない。そういうことにしよう。それがいい。思い出したくない。
はい。
いえ、なんでもないです。こっちの話です。
朝食はどうなさいますか？くっくっく。
絶対いいです。
連泊は
死んでもいいです。
寂しい。
今度個人的に恨みがあるやつを50人くらい合宿と称して来させるんで、ぜひもてなしてやってください。
超助かる。
チェックアウトで。
毎度あり。くっくっく。
What was with this place? Anyway, since I was staying here, that meant I checked the calendar on my phone and found out that it was Saturday, May 10th. I'd get lost at the mountain on the night of the 11th, and the mist would come at the evening of the 12th. And from what I could tell, I could remember everything. From what I recalled, this was Chiemi's first restarting point. I was upset I couldn't tell her about this, but I hope she remembered everything too. Anyway, it looked like the sheep did what it had to. Now I just had to fix the problem. Well, it did work out. I wrote something down and left the inn. It was a list containing the things I needed and things I had to do to solve the problem. I knew the 3 things I had to do pretty well. I had to stop the people of Yasumizu from killing each other in the feast. I had to deal with the Master of the Loop, who wanted the monster's resurrection, and I had to deal with the Miguruma, the leaders of the feast. Things wouldn't be solved if at least one of them wasn't cleared, and unlike before, I only had one chance. It'd be pretty boring if I messed up after all this resolution. I'd just take it easy. Humming the song of the same name, I slowly parked my bike. After filling up the tank at the nearest place, I looked at the map again. The main road was packed right now. I had to pick the quickest route while avoiding it. I didn't know the lay of the land, but I knew my destination, so it wouldn't be hard to get there. From my current perspective, the me from months ago had abandoned all responsibility and just wandered aimlessly out of frustration and abundance of free time. I was different now. I had a goal, a place I had to go to, and people who needed me. Thus, I didn't have to hesitate anymore. I had to hurry to Fujiyoshi, the misty place, once called the Werewolf Village, the misty Garden of God. All right. I went without any breaks, stopping only to refuel, and finally arrived. Honestly, I could barely stand, but my thirst and hunger were way worse. I had to rest at least once, seriously. My thoughts were dulled. I needed to raise my blood sugar. But there was something I had to do before that.
シャーセー無事戻りましたよ、羊さん。
Yes! This is one of the things I was thinking. So I remember, like, really early on, I was trying to figure out the voice of the sheep, and I don't think I wasn't successful. I think at one point I thought it was Mochi, but then at one point I began thinking it was her, and part of the reason was she's been the only character. Did the police guy? No, the policeman had a sprite, didn't he? But she had a sprite when we've had tons of, well, not tons, but we've had other characters who had speaking lines who had no character art, and yet this woman always did. And so, trying to think, and the sheep also spoke the same way. So even if she sounded different as the sheep, I was thinking, well, maybe it's her, because she, spoke rudely or abrasively. So I think this is showing that that this is the case.
てめえ一体何が何言ってんだ
いや、バレないと思ったんですか？あなたでしょ、羊さんの正体。
知らねえよ、帰れよ。
今の反応で言い逃れようって根性がすごいですが、まあいいんですけど。
なんでわかったんだよ。
あなたみたいに切れたファッションの女性はこの辺にいませんよ。せいぜい100円均一ファッションが限度です。あと何の腹積もりもない人間だったら最初にあんな道を進めないでしょうよ。
そんなことかよ。ほとんど釣りじゃねえか。
Okay, so those are more valid reasons within the game itself rather than my sort of meta reasoning. So, good work, Haruaki.
すみません。それはともかく何か食べるものをください。
廃棄前の弁当だったらタダで食わせてやるよ。
設定に忠実なんですね。
うるせえな。
おごりはありがたくいただくとして、少々面倒な仕入れを頼みたいんですが。
Is one of them going to be a flashlight? I'm just curious.
ここはコンビニだぞと一応は言うけど。
今更でしょう。
たく手のかかるやつだな。
これがメモです。
なんだこれ。ざけんな。いくらかかんだこんなもん。
無理ですか？
待ってろ。
ありがとうございます。あとは任せてください。
マジでこのまま行く気か？休んで行った方がいいんじゃねえのか？
そんな顔色悪く見えますか？僕。
むしろ一発決めたみてえに血色いいから逆に心配してんだ。踏ん張りどころでぽっきり折れんじゃねえぞ。
心配させてすみませんね。ところで僕はあなたたちに無言のうちにいいように利用されているんじゃないかという疑惑が急激に浮上したんですが。
It is interesting that, looking back on it now that it's confirmed, that the sheep did send us there on purpose. I'm curious what Haruaki means by you people.
あれ？なぜ僕が謝っている？
気にすんな。
This little...
ま、いいんですけどね。楽しかったねで終わりさえすれば。ちなみに敵には見つかったんです？
少なくともあっちは異変には気づいた。今は逃げ回ってるが、尻尾掴まれるのも時間の問題だ。
Their enemy was the mastermind, the creator of the loop. She was probably fighting her own battle already, one beyond my area of expertise.
まあ、せいぜい逃げ回ってやるよ。その間、あっちがお前の動きに気づくのをごまかせるかもしれねえ。
それはとても助かります。よろしくお願いしますね。
こっちからも聞いていいか？
はい。ええ、もちろん。
いつまでこの茶番続くんだよ。
これっきりですよ。
まあ、生きて帰ったらぶん殴るのは勘弁してやる。
She used me for all I was worth. Then she said she'd punch me if I died. It was kind of amazing, really. I couldn't tell if she was one hell of a tsundere or just insane.
じゃ。
あ。
I hid my impression and just got back to my bike. The tons of stuff I had on me made a rustling sound. Through my dozens of times being killed by Chiemi, I'd memorized the path here so well that I was sick of it. I passed the small overpass, stopped my bike at the boulder, and took off my helmet. This might have been an Okiba too, a sign leading to Fushiyoshi and Yasumizu. I placed the bike under a tree by the side of the road, placed what I had on the ground, and locked the bike. Then I hung the helmet's ring over the chain lock. After that, I opened the large mountaineering bag and took out whatever I needed right now. A headlamp. It was a bit big, but fit well, shone bright, lasted long, and was resistant to water. And this was a mountaineering stick. I'd already unpacked it in the store. I had to make sure I didn't get hurt. With my time becoming limited, I had to buy safety with money. I put on the backpack, putting the weight of all the stuff in it on my shoulders. I had to hurry. I'd wasted an entire hour just getting there. So we are entering by Saranaga. We are not going through Kamafujiyoshi. The distant sounds of water became louder, and I finally made my way through the darkness and arrived at the Saranaga Rapids. I unhesitantly took off my pants, got in some loose trunks, and covered my feet in work tabi and climbing sandals. Are we going to try to figure out how the mist is made or where it's coming from? I placed my clothes in the waterproof backpack, closed it, and put it on again. Through my fights with Chami, I'd found that crossing Saranaga was pretty dangerous. It'd be too pathetic if I fell and died here. I just couldn't let that happen. Anyway, it was time to go. All the rustling coming from the backpack felt like someone was laughing at me, saying that my worries were for nothing and that I was just jumping at shadows. The cold stream of May numbed my skin, and it felt like trying to sap the warmth from my body. But I couldn't give up. If I did, this would have all been for nothing. Too many people would suffer. However, I wasn't motivated by some sort of justice, a sense that I had to protect them. I was just interested in the fact that this struggle would end up saving so many lives. It was an amazing trade. I also wanted to get even with some people and set myself free of this one-sided obligation. It was a selfish motivation, but that was exactly why I could give it my all. I made it through the water and reached the other side. Naturally, there was no girl sawing her off her shotguns here, or the flashlight she brought. Not this day, anyway. I arrived. Everything was as expected so far. No, I dropped the climbing stick in the water, so that wasn't great. It was within my margin for error, though. I had to calm down. Getting distracted by my mistakes would keep me from focusing. I looked down at my phone. It was out of service range, of course. The time was 12:53 a.m., pretty early. It did work out. I changed my clothes and shoes, then got on the cliff. Before going any further, there is one thing I want to mention, I think. You know what's... I think I realized it a bit earlier, but it's one thing I don't think we've actually covered yet. We've learned the mystery behind Chami. We've learned the mystery behind the old man. We've learned the mystery behind, Kyo, or more specifically the Nasatos. We've learned about the Miguruma. We've learned about Kanzo and the past feasts. We've learned about the myths and history of this sort of place. We still, up until this point, we haven't learned what the deal with Mako is yet. What's the over-under, you think, on whether or not she's just a regular girl? Or if because she's not the sheep. We were thinking, or at least I was thinking, that she wasn't the dreamer, because she entered later. She didn't begin at the start of the dream. She entered later. I do recall some people thinking maybe Mako was the dreamer, and her arriving later was part of her strategy for trying to change things. Although I'm not sure how much that ended up changing things. I'm trying to think. We still had that time where she drew herself as an animal. We never got a confirmation on what that was. I originally thought it was going to be a sheep, but nope, she's not the sheep. I don't know. But presumably we'll find out, right? Shit. My memory told me that the cliff was the most dangerous place, especially for a non-local like myself. I tried to be careful, obviously, but the other stick I used for climbing broke. I almost fell, and reflexively used my hands, cutting them on a sharp stone. After making it up the cliff, I took out some whiskey, disinfected the wounds, and applied some first aid with a handkerchief. Thinking about what I'd do next, this wound was really painful. Maybe I had to loop back and... of course, that line of thinking would become habitual. It was a good thing I'd over-prepared. I only had one life now, so I had to keep that in mind. With that slight shift in mentality, I got back to work. The first one of the 3 objectives. I had to stop the people of Yasumizu from killing each other in the feast. And this was actually the hardest thing to do. Thus, I had to be both extremely careful and extra prepared. My thought process is that he might want to try to stop the mist from being released, because it's the mist that signals the start of the feast. If there is no mist, no feast. At least that's my thought process, but I'm not sure we know how to do that. Maybe he does. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Let's see. I would be proving a hypothesis. Oh my goodness. we are on one life at the very end here, and he's proving a hypothesis. I hope you're right, man. I was really pissed I hadn't thought of this sooner. I'd have loved to try it when resetting was still an option. But I was pretty confident I was right. If it wasn't here, it had to be in another place that I knew well, but this one seemed way more likely. I began preparing. I took out the 20-meter-long climbing rope. I had 5 spares. 100 meters. In the bag, too. I did not say that right. I had 5 spares, 100 meters. In the bag, too. Of course, they took up the most space in the backpack. Freeing one of them, I tied it up as if I was preparing to hang someone in the feast. Passing one swivel ring through the rope and hanging the other on another climbing rope, I made a 40-meter rope. It was enough to cover a cliff this tall. With this, I now had a way down below the hanging pine. I fixed the stopper I'd already tied to my waist on a rope and created a lifeline for myself. At least, I thought I did, but I had no experience with this. Still, I had to do it. Holding onto the rope, I began to slowly go down. Oh boy. At first, I spun around, messed up while handling the stopper, slid down a few times, and was generally on the verge of getting myself killed. Eventually, I began stopping the spin by touching the grass and branches on the cliff, and I figured out how to rappel down slowly. Finding what I was looking for while climbing down was hard work. I felt water drop on my forehead and thought it was rain, only to realize it was actually blood from my hands falling from the rope above me. That made me keenly aware of the pain and pressure from using my aching hands. It brought back my exhaustion, drowsiness, and muscle pain. It came with a mental fatigue, and it couldn't have come at a worse time. Why was I doing this? The stupidity of it came back to me. What if this was all for nothing? Of course it was. Shit. Shit, shit, shit. Before I knew it, I was muttering some profanities. I felt like it would help me shake off the urge to cry, the pain, the misery, the patheticness. Even so, it had to be here. The entrance had to be close. All of Yasumizu had taken it for granted that people had to be hanged from this pine. That wasn't word of mouth or anything. It was an idea that came naturally, and it was with them their whole lives. That meant that this was pretty much the work of God. However, the idea of hanging one side of the rope to the tree, the other on the neck, then pushing the victim off, felt illogical. Were they doing it because the only cleanup they had to do then was cutting the rope? Well, during the feast, the corpses did fall into Saranaga every now and then. The lack of sound had to be God's doing, but that wasn't always the case. Some corpses had been caught on the cliff or fell on the riverbank. Whenever that happened, the body was not only not cleaned up, it became a very real bother, reeking and full of disease. If you just wanted to hang the victim, all you had to do was put the rope over the branch and pull it up. That was often done outside of here. If what mattered to them was dropping the body in Saranaga, then pushing them off was enough. Even if they were just focusing on making a kill certain, there weren't many times they could actually do this. I didn't think that a murder method that only had been done every several dozen or so years would become part of Yasumizu's common soul. That seemed especially unlikely when, for the past 500 or so years, the locals only used the feast to control the local community. In that case, I imagine that the truth was different. The hanging wasn't for killing. It was to meet God. That unique way of praying, where they joined their hands and hid their faces, had to represent the remains of the lifeline they'd held before God. Thus, I'd surely arrive there if I went down. I'd believe that. Believe. Believe. Suddenly something appeared. About midway down the cliff, on one of the links between the climbing rope, I found a large boulder sticking out from the bottom directly across from me. It was large enough to stand on. There were some pine saplings on it, probably the children of the hanging pine. It looked suspicious. I had to get there. So I began swinging. Moving my legs and waist, I slowly created a swinging motion. The climbing rope made noise as I clung to it. The fear of it disconnecting and the fear of it hitting the boulder struggled violently, but I managed to ignore them. When the swing was good enough, I waited for when I was over the boulder and stuck my legs out. I ended up having to grab onto the little pines, and my hands hurt like hell because of the prickliness, but that didn't matter now. I adjusted my headlamp and started examining the place thoroughly. Bingo! Right behind all the growth here, there was an aged wooden torii.
よし。
I felt my vigor return, but I needed to press on. Behind the torii, there was an aged door sealed by decayed chains. I pulled on it, and the chains just broke, letting me in. This was no way to hide a god, people of Fujiyoshi. I opened the door wide, hunched down, and stuck my head into the hole. It was big enough for a crouching adult to pass through. It was a hole in the side of the cliff, angled slightly upward. It was an artificial place by digging through the rock here. It was dry inside, probably due to the slope and the door protecting it. All right. It wasn't exactly what I expected, but it was pretty damn close. Now, I needed to secure a way to get here from the bottom, create a camp, and take away the route from the top. Thankfully, the young trees here were firmly planted and had large trunks, so I could easily tie a climbing rope around them and make my way down. Is this going to be his fortress, then? With this and that, I successfully went down to the riverside below. I then got back up to the hanging pine, got my stuff, and took care of the climbing rope. Some would come to the graveyard before the mist began, so they'd know something was up if they saw the rope. It'd all go to waste then. I had to hide until the mist came. This, too, was part of stopping the people of Yasumizu from killing each other into the mist. It was absolutely necessary for the cause. I began creating a riverside camp. Actually, it was on the rocky area above the riverbeds. They couldn't see me from the top if I was here, and the flood due to the rain wouldn't be a problem. Is he gonna try and, like, convince people that he is God or something? Though it wasn't much of a camp, I just took out a blanket and lay down. After drinking some bottled water, I looked at my phone. It was past 3 on Sunday night. There would be rain in 24 hours, and Saranaga could gain some water. I had to get everything done in the hole until then and prepare for the great act. But, well, it was enough for today.
疲れた。
I'd arrived at Yasumizu a day earlier than normal and confirmed a theory of mine. All that was left now was to enhance the proof and prepare the fakery. I could just go to sleep for now. I'd have to do things right after the night cleared, so I'd set a timer and just nap rather than sleep. There. Good night. Okay. we're getting to time, so I think I'm actually going to call it here. And next time we'll dive into what the actual plan is. So what do we think's going on here? I went through several different things here. I was thinking maybe he was trying to stop the mist. Now it's something to do with God. So under the cliff where the hanging pine is, there was actually a shrine to God. Which god are we talking about? Are we talking about Shinai-san or Shinai-sama, or are we talking about the badger? And what's the intention here? He said the fakery, so is he going to try and convince the people that he is one of the aforementioned gods and try to convince the people that way? Use their faith in a different way? Huh. Interesting. Well, I'm glad I have a little more time to try to think about the answers. 'Cause I'm really not sure. I still don't know who the dreamer is. I don't know why the Miguruma are still doing this. And I guess I don't really... I guess I'm starting to get an understanding of what Haruaki intends to do. Yeah, okay. Alright, a little more time to think about this. Alright, I've been The Worm. This has been Raging Loop, and I hope you're all doing alright, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.